Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Ben Whitlock, president of Mobile Fixtures based in Mobile, Alabama. At the beginning of this year, Ben and three partners purchased the company from long-term second-generation owner Walne Donald Jr. What I loved about this transition was the desire to keep the company in private hands and operated by the same executive team that has done the heavy lifting for the past several years. This continuity will be one of the aspects of their continued success. As you will hear, Ben is a people person. He believes in face-to-face interactions and listening to the unique needs of their customer base. Hospitality is a passion business. Their clients don't need another transactional supplier. They are looking for an empathetic human to accompany them on the journey. Ben has a great story, and I hope you enjoy listening. This episode is brought to you by HMI Performance Incentives. In today's economic environment, distributors need to invest in innovative sales and marketing strategies. Loyalty incentive programs are used by small to mid-sized organizations each and every day. Last year, I had the opportunity to do an episode with their Chief Strategy Officer, Lincoln Smith. One of the things I enjoyed about our conversation was that I came away with a sense that HMI really understands how these programs can help distributors. You can learn more about HMI performance incentives at www.hmiaward.com or connect with them on LinkedIn at HMI Performance Incentives. Be sure to let them know you heard about them from me, Jason Bader, on the Distribution Talk podcast. Well, hey, Ben, thanks for coming on Distribution Talk. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me.
I appreciate you having me. This is exciting for me to be a part of it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. You know, some of the things you and I talked about, I think, we're going to have a great show here. We're going to get down to the nitty gritty a little bit of restaurant equipment supply and that nature. So if you wouldn't mind, Ben, could you give us just a little history of your involvement in the organization, how you chose distribution, or if it chose you and you just never made it out?
Yeah, it actually kind of found me instead of me finding it.
I know the feeling, my man.
When I graduated college 88 years ago or however long it was, I was actually a professional golfer. I played professional golf for about 3 years out of college, bounced around and worked at a country club and really wanted to hold on to chasing my dream of playing golf for a living as long as I could. And I realized, this was 1999. I realized in 99, I was not good enough to make it on the world stage, which was fine. So I went to work at my parents' restaurant. My parents used to own a restaurant in Mobile, Alabama, which is where I lived. And I worked in the restaurant there, just kind of bounced around, figuring out what I wanted to do when I grew up. I had a college degree and I was a decent golfer. And the owner of Mobile Fixture at the time, Walne Donald, knew my parents. He had a relationship with them through Mobile Fixture and through the restaurant. And he was in there eating lunch one day and we got to talk. And I said, I don't know what I want to do. I really like the restaurant business. I just don't want to work nights, weekends, and holidays for the rest of my life. So Walne offered me a job. I accepted it. It was a entry-level salesperson along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. My training, no offense to him or Mobile Fixture, but the Mississippi Gulf Coast was a very ghost-ridden, we haven't called on that territory in decades. So this is how old I am. I got a green bar paper of a list of accounts that we haven't called on in 10 years. And he said, go call on them. So I got in my car. I drove 52 miles every day to Mississippi and started calling on some restaurants there. Didn't get very far. And one day I decided I'm going to cold call a casino, because the Mississippi Gulf.
Sure, try that.
Yeah. So I walked in and went to the front desk of the hotel. I said, hey, my name is Ben Whitlock. Is the food and beverage director around? Now, 99 out of 100 times, that person's going to say, they're in a meeting, they're on the phone. Leave me your card. This just so happened, the vice president of food and beverage happened to be walking by the front desk as I was standing there asking if I could see him. And I guess I just caught him at the right time. Anyway, we sat down, we hit it off. we started selling a bunch of equipment and small wares to one of the casinos on the coast, which then parlayed into another casino and another and another and another. And it goes to show that cold calling works.
Yeah.
So that's my little pitch there. But fast forward 4 years, August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit. And it literally wiped out every customer I had on the Mississippi coast. I was also dealing with some chain restaurants and some others, but the majority of my portfolio was gone overnight. So I was looking at 2 or 3 very lean years of sales because everything that I'd worked for, they were gone and they were all coming back, but it was going to take time. Anyway, Walne and I were at lunch one day, a couple months after the hurricane, and I knew that he was planning on doing a location here in Nashville. So I just asked him, I said, well, who are you going to get to run the Nashville branch? He said, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. We're not opening for another 6 months or so.
Careful what you say.
I said, hell, I'll do it. And I kind of said it as a joke, halfway joking.
Right.
And you have to know Walne, he's very reactionary. When he hears something that he wants to do, he does it. And, I said, hell, I'll do it. He goes, okay, done. So we were literally still sitting there at lunch. I called my wife. She's a teacher and she was home from school that day. I called her. I said, what do you think about moving to Nashville? She said, yeah, let's do it. And it was like that.
Wow.
And
that's fantastic.
45 days later, we are living in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We didn't know anybody up here. We didn't have a single customer. We knew nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So we built up this branch. It took a few years, but some things happened in Nashville, which really helped accelerate growth here, which we don't need to go into, but it's obviously become a very hot town and it's continuing to be that.
For sure.
So once we built up some notoriety in this town and some success, that's when a group of us got together about the buyout of the company, which was planned for several years. And luckily we were able to close the deal at the end of last year.
Excellent, man. No, that's a heck of a story there. Thinking about when you were talking about your golf career and not wanting to work nights and weekends, I have a very good friend.
It's horrible.
Who, he was a teaching pro and just got sick of working in the evenings. And he just said, I was done. And he finally said, I don't see a future here, and went into software sales, actually, is where he wound up. But now it's interesting. Do you think some of the things that you learned, as that pro and, working on golf courses and stuff, do you think that helped in your sales career?
Oh God. Yeah. There's no question. In fact, when we're interviewing new salespeople, we want to see what kind of athletic backgrounds they may or may not have. It's not a necessity, but any athlete who has ever played high school, post-high school, college, post-college, whatever, they're competitive and they don't like to lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the more individualistic the sport, the better we think that they are at sales.
Yes.
Golfers, tennis players, baseball players are very individualistic as well. Anytime we can interview someone with that kind of background, we're going to take a hard look at them.
Yeah, it's a great point. I had a friend years ago who was a competitive swimmer for LSU.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the sales manager, and he would absolutely look for individual sports people and people that competed. I mean, again, nothing against the team sports side, but it's that individual drive. And he was very into timed sports, of course, because he was a swimmer. But that's what he would look for, when he was looking for those salespeople. So this is definitely interesting.
Yeah, one of the funny things that we say around here, and all of the folks here in the Nashville branch for sure know this. Billy Beane said it back in the movie Moneyball, that he hates losing more than he likes to win. I'd like to think that I said that long before he said it in the movie. It's very true. We as athletes or former athletes, this is not an athletic body anymore. But
see, that's why we're on radio.
That's
man.
exactly right.
That's why we're on audio,
I
not
definitely
video.
have a body for radio. But the mantra is you go into a situation and you expect to win. So winning is like, okay, great. Let me check it off the list, move on to something else. When you lose, you remember that loss. I can remember every big tournament I've ever lost. I can remember every sale that I've ever lost. I remember maybe half of the wins. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's just the way it is.
That's a therapist talk right there. There's something for the therapist right there.
No doubt. Yeah. No doubt.
Oh, that's interesting. You talked about going down, kind of opening that territory. Now, had casinos been in full swing at that point? I'm trying to think back from my history. I know that, I've been to Biloxi, I've been, to these casinos. Had they been cooking for a little while by the time you had?
Yeah, the casinos really started getting popular probably 1990, 91,
Yeah, that sounds
around
about
there.
right. Yeah.
So they were doing very well. In fact, so this would have been 15 years in. They were all getting to the point of having to renovate and spend money to redo things. And we were going to be a part of that. Hurricanes change lives down there. And that's one of the reasons I left as well. Was I'm over it. I was over the hurricanes. I was over the having to buy a generator and standing in line for gas. And I just, the hell with it, I'm done. And so we decided to move north where they have, 1-inch blizzards and tornadoes. So it's great.
Yeah, one calamity for another. You just switching seats on the Titanic.
Yep.
So speaking of the restaurant, I guess if you think about, Katrina, obviously the hospitality business really took a hit during that time, as you saw. As you said, your clients were wiped out and whatnot. I can't help but draw a parallel to the pandemic here that really, hospitality of all the industries that I serve, the vertical markets, boy, anybody calling on hospitality, man, they took a shot, really, really tough shot during the pandemic. So,
yeah, they did. And I will tell you, the pandemic, as it relates to hospitality, is probably all my fault. Back in February.
We'll blame you. Okay. We'll blame you then.
You won't be the first. So in February of 2020, mid-February of 2020, the five of us, so the four future owners and then Walne, the five of us were sitting in our conference room in Mobile, which we meet every month in person. We were meeting that day and our bank came in just for like a yearly review from the previous year, 2019. And, everybody was happy. We had these great projections for 2020, record sales, profits, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then one of the bankers asked us, well, what do y'all think about this coronavirus thing that's possibly heading our way? Well, all of us kind of looked around and nobody said anything. So I said, all right, well, I guess I have to be the one to fly the flag. Well, my exact words, I don't think this is going to affect the restaurant business all that much. People will always go out to eat. People will always go to school and eat. People will always get sick and eat, and people will always go to jail and eat. Well, looking back, that was a terrible, terrible thing. At the time,
I would agree with you, Ben. I think you just nailed it right there.
At the time, everybody kind of sat around, nodded their heads. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Restaurant business, not recession proof, but they have their ups and downs. Yeah, that was a terrible. Looking back, hindsight is not good to me in that state.
Well, again, it's your expectation to win. That expectation of winning, hating to lose. But yeah, so it's stuff like this and I really don't think any of us could have imagined the enormity of this. Nobody could have. I really don't believe that. So
no, I guess I'm a lot of rainbows and unicorns because of who I am and the job that I have. But I can speak for the national branch that I'm based in. About, we closed the showroom or we closed the offices for a couple of weeks. But when we reopened them, we had no customers to sell to. No one was buying anything. No one wanted quotes. So we decided as a group, 21 of us here in this building, we rearranged the entire showroom. We organized the warehouses. We organized our offices, kind of refreshed everything. We had been here, 14 years at the time. And we just decided, let's have some quality time together. Everybody's a little bit on edge. No one really wants to go out. We ordered lunch in every day this lasted about a week. Ordered lunch in every day. We found some inventory that we'd been looking for and we decided to refresh some things. And it was actually a very good team building exercise that we weren't even planning on it being. This was just, we were trying to pass the time.
Right.
So I think that was a big deal. And I know a lot of our clients in Nashville, especially these chef-driven restaurants, when you're in a town like this and that pre-pandemic, they're doing 300-400 covers a night, 6 days a week. They don't have time to clean their restaurants or refresh their walk-ins. And, so a lot of our clients did the same thing. They took the time to spend with their employees and their staff and some of their guests that would come into the restaurant still during the pandemic. And everybody got a lot closer. It was a lot of team building vertically, all the way from the restaurant guest, all the way up to the reps and the manufacturers in our industry. There was a lot of time spent talking about anything other than restaurant equipment. we got to know our clients pretty well during that time. And they would call us and they're in tears because they owe us $800 and they don't have the money to pay it. We'd spend 15, and I'm already getting choked up, but we'd spend 15, 20 minutes on the phone together. And, we're consoling them saying, hey, we're going to be fine. You're going to get through this. And, we really started to lean on each other in a vertical sense with our customers, and then as us being customers to manufacturers. So there was a lot of positive that came out of it. I wish it would have been under different circumstances.
I think we all do, but I would agree with you that, a lot of really amazing silver linings came out of that. And I think that's one of the things I would really hate to see, that kind of empathy, that kind of relationship building, and that go away just because all of a sudden we're starting to boom again. How do you keep that in? How do you keep that momentum going of that really close relationship? I think empathy is the word I keep coming back to for others, and when they're in a challenging situation.
It's hard to do that, especially now with supply chain and inflation and lead times and all the trigger words that you hear every day on the news.
Yeah, we're not quite out of the pain yet.
No, we're really not. And in fact, our industry, we're just now, I don't even know if we've peaked in the pain post-pandemic, but I think building the relationships with our customers throughout the pandemic and shortly thereafter post-pandemic, I think that's helped a lot with us calling a customer and saying, I know I said that it was going to ship today. I just found out it's not shipping for 2 more months. Now, the customer's going to get mad, but they understand I'm not lying to them. I'm not selling them a bill of goods. I'm telling them the information that I'm getting, and they believe that because it's the relationship. I'm not going to lie to a customer. That's stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I've talked to a lot of salespeople about this. It's best to be first with bad news, or if it's a price increase, or if it's this extended lead time, be honest. Yeah, they're going to be upset, and learn to absorb that anger or that frustration, but you're being honest, and you will be respected.
What we tell our salespeople, and we just did this, we had a company-wide sales department call, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago. And one of the first things we said was, I would rather you tell the customer the truth on day one and tell them that their walk-in cooler is shipping in 41 weeks. I'd rather you tell them that rather than take the order, take their money, and then wait 35 weeks before you tell them it's not shipping for another 6. And if that customer gets mad and they go somewhere else, that's fine. That's their choice. That's on them. We are not forcing them to go anywhere. We're just trying to give them all of the information that we can at the beginning, good or bad.
Right. And I think it is that relationship building that you focus on pretty heavily in your organization and in the business. But you've had some competitive pressures from the e-commerce world. So, there's quite the spread there, that balancing, you've got e-commerce pressure, but you all really need to do business face to face. How do we combat e-commerce? How do you balance that? Yeah, exactly.
Well, e-commerce is not for everybody, and I'm not for everybody. Or Mobile Fixture, it's not me. Our company is not for everybody, and that's fine.
Yeah.
One of the things that most of my coworkers will say to combat the e-commerce is the internet doesn't say thank you. And supporting local Little League or visiting your customer and spending money in your customer's restaurant. The internet can't do that. Now, I'm not bashing the internet. I think e-commerce has been very good to our industry. It really has. The 3 or 4 big giants in our industry that are e-commerce based, I think they've done a very good job maintaining some integrity. I was very concerned 5, 6, 7 years ago, back before we knew what kind of impact e-commerce was going to have. I was very concerned that it would squeeze companies out like mine or like some of your other guests that you've had. And it hasn't, and I don't think it will.
Yeah.
And I don't want to jinx it like I did with the pandemic, but
right. You're batting around, averages.
Right. But it's a very large industry and it's a very complex industry. So there are times where a customer will walk in and say, how much is your cheapest refrigerator? That's not our client. And we have inexpensive refrigerators, but our clients are the ones that are building a restaurant and they need help with design. They need help. They need us to hold their hand throughout the process. And at the end of the day, it doesn't cost that much more than if you were to buy it online. It really doesn't. That is a big misconception in our industry. There's too much competition for us to get crazy with margins.
Yeah. And again, trying to drive back that total cost of ownership and That's been around forever. That concept of total cost of ownership and really trying to drive that into the salespeople that work with you. That's a tough one. And that's really, I think, really most of the organizations today, they should be focusing more on how do you combat that internet price shopper or choose not to do business with them at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, we don't do that. We don't choose not to do business with people, but we will tell them, this is my price.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is whether it's pre-pandemic, pandemic, or now. This is our price. This is the best price that I'm going to give you. And here are the services that you're getting along with it. If you don't want any of those services and you're buying strictly based on price, I may not be the right guy for you. I can get down and dirty if I have to. I might not always be able to. And that's okay. Right. No is a perfectly acceptable answer.
I think, Ben, as you built this organization, you don't necessarily want to get down and dirty with everyone. Down and dirty is just not necessarily a service-based model. It just isn't.
It's not. No, you're going to have to draw a line in the sand at some point. And while we want to work with every client we can, we know that it's not feasible to do so. And we have to run a business based on the information that we have and the best decisions we can make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that a big part of your business is really that design, that advising on your restaurant customers. These are folks that have a dream, some sort of dream, that this romantic notion of restaurant ownership. Now, frankly, they should have spent some time inside a restaurant, before investing in this dream, but you see that all the time.
Yeah, we do. And I think that all of our locations are established enough to where we have our portfolio of clients and we know who are our long-term clients and which ones that we're trying to chase after. But it doesn't stop the husband and wife in their mid to late 50s who walk in at the front door of our showroom and say, we're going to open up a meatloaf restaurant because my wife makes the best meatloaf. And we have to ask questions of, have you ever worked in a restaurant? No? Okay. How are you going to run this? Oh, we're going to hire people that are very experienced and they know what they're doing. And that's great. It could be the next.
Probably the smartest thing they could do.
It really is. And I'll tell you, every restaurant concept that walks in our front door has the potential to be the next Cracker Barrel or Chick-fil-A. It really does. Most of them are not. Yeah. And that's okay. We have a lot of clients that never open a second location and they're very content with that and very successful. And they're just as good of a customer as the concept with 100 locations.
Yeah.
So very diverse industry that we're in.
It reminds me kind of that, that old adage, how do you make a small fortune in a restaurant?
Start
with a large one. Yeah, exactly. Start with a big one. Yeah, I listened to a couple. You had an interview with a gentleman in Nashville and you all were talking about the worst concepts that you'd ever run into. And I think you talked about a ham restaurant or something. Yes.
Ham. That's all he was going to have was ham. It was going to be like 13 different kinds of ham, but every menu item contained ham. Ham salad, ham sandwiches, ham soup. I don't know. It was, luckily that concept never developed. I know that's a real shocker, but it was a thing. It was a real thing.
So how do you, as a salesperson or when somebody comes in with this concept, it's not going to fly. How do you deal with this? I mean, in a gentle way, how do you help that person understand that I think, you're wasting your money here?
Well, that's a hard line to walk. It really is.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, all honesty, all joking aside, there's an ethical side to doing business and a moral side, all those other words. But at the end of the day, every single person that, like I said, every single person that walks in our door with a concept has the potential to be a superstar. Now, I think people who have been in this industry can identify pretty quick whether or not they're really going to be. Our jobs as distributors or dealers is to give every client the resources they need to be successful. Now, whether or not they become successful, they have to have some skin in the game. They've got to be able to execute everything. Our job is no different than the millwork guy or the electrician or the plumber or any other trade on a job site. We are providing them the resources they need to be successful. And I'll be honest, there are literally dozens of concepts that we've done that we have talked before they've opened saying you need to get their money up front. They're not going to be month. They have no chance. And they've got 4 or 5 different locations now. So we don't know.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen.
Absolutely. No, I think it is interesting, but I would suspect that there have been more disappointments than rock stars or huge successes in this.
Not that many more than you would think.
Okay.
It's fairly, it's probably a little bit swayed towards failures rather than surprising successes, but
Yeah.
not as much as you might think. We've done some concepts that to this day, I'll drive through downtown Nashville and see a concept that we did 7, 8, 10 years ago. It's like, there's no way they're still open.
That's great.
Sure enough, they're still open.
Oh, that's fun. No, that's good. And you applaud people when they make it.
Yeah, it's great.
I love seeing somebody who beat the odds. I absolutely love that. But on some of those challenging ones that, you're like, oh boy, this is not going to be good. How do you get your money back? Or do you have to go in and pull your equipment out? I mean, how does that work?
Well, the world has changed over the past years. So since the financial downturn in 10, 11, 12, we've had to alter our payment terms, not because of customers, but just the way business has to work and because of margins getting squeezed and expenses and all the other things. We have payment terms that, we still let the customer have a little bit of credit, but not nearly as much as they used to.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes some sense. So one of the things, if I could segue here a little bit, something you mentioned earlier, that you and 3 other partners decided to buy out the company. And this is something that's been going on for a little bit from Walne. And I think my understanding is that Walne really wanted to keep the company in the hands of the employees, family, privately held, tightly held, rather than, I'm sure he had the option to go with a private equity buyout or another competitor, could have bought the organization. But it sounds to me like he felt very strongly about keeping it in the hands of the executive team or the management team. Tell me about that process. It had to be a little bit scary. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, time to do this.
We're still in the present tense of it being scary.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
The ball started rolling about 6 years ago. Walne put the senior management team together, which consisted of the 4 of us owners now, plus him. At the time, Walne was CEO and chairman of Mobile Fixture. I was named president of the company. Keith Murray, who has been with the company for 25 years, he was named COO of the company. Chris Pacey, who has been with the company 25 plus years, was named director of sales. And Lee Thompson, who has been with us, I think 7, maybe 8 years, going on 8 years now, she is our CFO. So the 5 of us together, Walne started the ball in motion, but the 5 of us all started putting pieces together and figuring out how a buyout looked and how it was going to work for the 4 of us moving forward. Our original goal was to close the deal, I think at the end of 2018.
Oh, okay.
We chose not to do it at the end of 18. We didn't hit our sales target, and we felt like we wanted one more year of carryover with the structure that we had. We got to the end of 19, sales were better, our expenses were okay, but for whatever reason, we still weren't ready. And this was more on the 4 of us than it was on Walne not ready to give it up. We felt like we needed a little bit more time. Well, then pandemic hits. We knew that we could close by the end of 2020. And then pandemic hit. And by the end of March of 2020, we all said, all right, we're not talking about a buyout. We're not talking about anything other than sales and expenses for the rest of this year. So we did. And then come January 21, things were loosening up. Our sales were coming back. And we felt the 4 of us were a lot more comfortable approaching Walne again with the buyout, which is why we ended up closing in 21. So it took 3 years longer than we wanted. But looking back, I don't think we would have been in the same position that we are now had we done the buyout back then. We needed Walne's expertise, his leadership, his thinking. He was a huge help during the pandemic. And aside from that, you're going through pandemic, you got no sales, you have the same expenses with no sales,
right?
You have no profit, but you have the same expenses with no profit. Lee Thompson, our CFO, she's a banker by trade. So, CPA and a banker, and she went through Sarbanes-Oxley and she went through Too Big to Fail back in the day. She understood the financial changes that we had to make immediately during the pandemic just to get us to survive and hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel. So between Walne and Lee during the pandemic, they took a lot of that pressure, the internal pressure off, allowing Chris and Keith and I to go out and focus on long-term sales and acquiring new clients and being able to look into the future.
Yeah.
They were dealing with short term, and then three of us got to look into long term. And that was a huge benefit.
I can't imagine the four of you all of a sudden, we assume ownership, we're starting to pay this off, and the pandemic hits. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, that would just absolutely, it could frankly destroy that partnership, and it could force more drastic measures there.
It was bad enough being a minority partner during that time. To have an equal or a majority share, no way. It was horrible. Horrible.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. I think it would have also been, and again, I'm just kind of projecting here, but I think it would have dampened your outlook at the future, and you would have been so burdened with this.
We would have been so consumed with short-term, safety measures that we were not going to be able to do any kind of long-term planning. Yeah. Now we fast forward to 2022, and the four of us have equal ownership. We are not held by private equity. We're not a conglomerate. We are still locally owned and operated. It's nice and it's great, and we're excited to have that. But at the same time, our names are on the papers. And
indeed. Oh, yeah.
We laugh and joke, but we're playing with live ammo.
Yes.
We really are. This is it.
How many employees or associates do you have in the organization?
I think we have 109.
109. Yeah. I mean, let's face it, that's 109 families you are responsible for now.
Yeah, we say that. And it's funny you say it that way because we don't have 109 employees. We have 109 families.
Absolutely.
Now you're talking about 500 people or whatever. Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Growing up in my family business, that was something that was drilled into me pretty heavily early on, is that you have a responsibility here. You have a pretty awesome responsibility. And at a young age, you're like, ooh, this is a little overwhelming. So.
Yeah, I would tell you that it's overwhelming. We are 94 days into this. When we closed on our deal back in December, the four of us sat in a room after it was all done and we said, okay, what's next? And I think I may have brought it up first. I said, well, I'm going into next year, starting January 1st, the way a presidential administration would take over the White House. They have 100 days.
First 100 days, sure.
First 100 days to set their agenda. The presidency in our country lasts 100 days. After that, all you're trying to do is execute what you've started.
What you promised, right?
What you promised. So our goal was to make it through the first 100 days without screwing anything up, without making major changes. We wanted it as status quo as possible. We're 94 days in. We're doing okay. We haven't had major disruptions knock on some wood, but so far so good. We're happy with things so far.
And Walne is planning to stay as a consultant for a little bit, just to kind of help you all ease through this and move through.
Yeah, we actually put it in our agreement that we wanted him to stay on for 5 years as a consultant. He's got a few responsibilities that are, frankly, they're important to the four of us and to the company. And he's got 30 years of institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
Why would you cut someone to the curb? That's silly.
Well, I think on his side, it's extremely generous to help you all and maybe shepherd you all through this next couple of years until you really feel like you're ready to assume that. Look, there's going to be, as you said, you're in 94 days in. There are going to be some hurdles that you have to work through. I'm thinking, financing is going to be a hurdle. There's all kinds of things that once you get put into this ownership seat, you just don't know what you don't know. And that's going to be nice to have him there. Yeah.
It's exactly true. It's a hard day. Every day is harder than the last, but easier than the last because you've got one more day of experience to draw from. As minute as that sounds, it's true. I was not fully prepared for the amount of phone calls and emails and text messages that came on day one. It was pretty overwhelming. I'm not going to lie. Mm-hmm. And now the first 2 weeks of the year in our industry are busy anyway.
Right.
Add that to the new role. And it was a challenge, a little stressful sometimes.
Oh, there you go. It's a good thing you know how to deal with pressure. So that's,
we get there.
Yeah.
We get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and before we wrap up, could you just share a little bit about the communication plan with the associates? That's, I think, is a very big part of a change in ownership. How did you all communicate this? And have you seen changes in behavior at all? Or,
because the whole transition lasted 4 or 5 years, I think everybody had gotten immune to the senior management team or the horsemen, or we have all kinds of nicknames.
I'm sure.
Around the company and in fact, there's probably a lot that I've never heard before.
Probably not, and probably don't want to.
we spent the last 4 or 5 years running the company the way Walne did, with some minor tweaking here or there.
Yeah.
We made sure that he was still the majority owner. So we still had to get his approval for things. And he was great throughout the whole process. So when it was time to flip the switch, there wasn't a whole lot of fanfare.
Mm-hmm.
We sent an email out to the entire company announcing the ownership change and kind of spoke about why we're doing this and how we did it. And there was not a lot of discussion. We received a lot of emails, thank you. And I think it's great. It's exciting. Outside of our company, we got a lot more reaction than we were expecting, at least a lot more reaction than I was expecting. We got a lot of calls from manufacturers and rep groups and frankly, other competitors wanting to know, well, how did y'all do this? And what was the structure? Right. And I'm like, well, we're not going to talk about that, but I mean, I'm not going to.
It was not easy. Look, transition of ownership is not easy in general. And so you all found something that worked for you. And even if you gave them the secret sauce, could they execute it? Probably not.
It takes a lot longer than you would think.
Yeah.
And for us we were adamant. We were not going to bring in outside equity, private equity partners.
Right.
Yes, I'm sure Walne had been approached in the past by some of the larger conglomerates in the industry and from private equity. This was his family. This is as much of his legacy as it is for us to buy a company. We're looking out for his life, and his legacy is Mobile Fixture. So we wanted to make sure that it stayed inside the company, and it was all the owners have to be active in the company. We're not going to allow someone to own the company and not work there. That's not what we are. I need you to have skin in the game.
Sure. And a paycheck coming in too. So
sometimes, hopefully, yeah, if we do things right. Yeah.
Sure. Well, Ben, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. Just really from the short time we've been speaking, I can only see success going forward. You all are, sounds like you're dynamic and excited about the future. And I think going through what you all did in the last few years, you're battle tested. You've got ways to get through. So
we're trying. I didn't have any gray in my beard or my head before all this started. And every day there's a new one coming in.
Well, just wait till it starts going away. As you can see, it just decides to retreat totally. So
Right.
All right.
No, it's exciting. We're looking forward to it.
All right. Again, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time with me. And I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by Connected Peers. Connected Peers is a new organization dedicated to providing fast-paced monthly networking opportunities for distribution industry managers. To learn more about how Connected Peers can bring solutions to your role, visit us on the web at www.connectedpeers.com.